Over the last 6 weeks for Doctor Who Sunday, we have been looking at the key to time. Well, those 6 weeks are up. The review is complete, and I have put together the entirety of the review for you to watch should you wish to do so. Please do enjoy, and I shall see you on Sunday. Hello and welcome back to Chat About It, Don't Shout About It with me, Rachel, the Queen of the Woke, as crowned by one of my haters.
I crown you Queen of the Woke!
Let's chat about it. We are looking at the key to time. Please do let me know in the comments section below what you think of the Reboss operation, which is what I am reviewing. Reboss operation is naturally the first installment of the key to time, which was voted by you, the subscriber. Please head on over to the post page after this video to vote on the current poll should you wish to do so. The Reboss operation was written by Robert Holmes, and I didn't know that actually. I thought it was somebody else originally, and it aired on the 2nd of September to the 23rd of September 1978. Now this review isn't going to be too long. I have intentions of piecing together all of the reviews and releasing it as one big one for Christmas. I've done it with all the other ones that have been sort of big episodic series, so why not do it with this one? The Doctor is looking to go on holiday with K9. However, he is sequestered by the White Guardian. Our introduction to the White Guardian. He is told that he needs to look for the key to time, which is disguised in 6 parts and scattered across the cosmos. He is given a detector and a new companion. He is also warned of the Black Guardian. In the TARDIS, he meets his new assistant, another time lady, who he nicknames Romana. Okay, and guess what? The time ladies do exist in Classic. Wow, we never knew that. Okay, together they go looking for the first piece. They land on Reboss and they use the detector to start hunting for the first segment. They have no idea what it looks like, and nor do we. They discover that the room contains the crown jewels, which is where the detector has taken them, and the Doctor begins to take the time to break into them. However, before he can finish, they hear people coming and they hide instead. Grifvinder K, a prince, has arrived on Reboss, and he hopes that he would be able to get his revenge on his brother, as he was supposed to have been king. His plan was to buy Reboss from Garen so that he could train an army that he could use to retake his rightful claim to the throne. He later discovers that he was conned by Garen. He takes Garen, Romana, and the Doctor prisoner. Meanwhile, we are also introduced to Jethric, which is a very valuable substance and made up a great part of Unstoff and Garen's story. That Jethric is mined for on the planet to make it seem like the planet is worth buying. The Jethric is planted in the area where the crown jewels are and is later removed by Unstoff, who makes a break for it but has to go into hiding, where he meets Binro, or Binro the Heretic as he calls himself, where they have some wonderful scenes together. Unstoff and Binro obviously move then off to the catacombs, where it is a little bit safer as Unstoff is being hunted down by Vinder K and his men. The Doctor, Romana, and Garen all escape with K9 and also head into the catacombs. Garen steals the detector to use it to find Unstoff, revealing that the Jethric is the key segment. Is the Doctor able to put a stop to Vinder K and retrieve the segment? I won't lie to you, the key to time is not a favourite of mine, okay? There's no reasons for it. It's just not. However, the concept and the ideas that go into it and behind it lead to some of my favourite Big Finish stories. So there is that adds that bonus to it. Do you like the key to time? Do you like it? Let me know in the comments section below. I have to say, I really do love K9. He's like a little secret Doctor Who vice of mine. Okay, I know. He's not everyone's favourite, but I've always loved the idea of man's best friend, in this being a robot dog for the Doctor. I know that the people working on the production found him a bit cumbersome because of the logistics behind him, but he is the light of my life in this story. I really do enjoy him. You actually see, though, at one point why they get so irritated with the design of him. He can't get over the TARDIS in part 3. He kind of hits the edge of the TARDIS and rolls back ever so slightly still. He is a hero in my eyes, and I always will enjoy watching K9. He's a lot of fun. Another light up with the screen is Mary Tam. There she is on the screen right now. You can see where Lalla Ward paid very close attention to her performance. You can see, obviously, she worked with her too, actually. You can see what Mary did through Lalla. Lalla does carry it forward. This version of Romana is fun, but instantly at loggerheads with the Doctor. I liked that. The Doctor did not want anyone smart like he was to rain on his parade, but he comes to the terms of the fact that he actually does need her for this. Now, with this story and the key to time itself, it does make sense to have another time lady. Okay, I am highly critical. Hands up, admit it. And you've seen it. That having someone with the same smarts of the Doctor as the Doctor does cause a lack of question. And of course, the companion is the eyes into the TARDIS for the viewer. We do get that with Romana, and we do get a great moment though. Romana is fresh from the academy, so much so that she does not know what Jethric is. So the Doctor gets Garen to tell her. It's an interesting bit of writing because normally the Doctor would be the one to tell her. But for the plot, I think it was important more so to have Garen to do it than anything else. So nice touch. I think that Mary Tam holds herself very well and dominates as Romana on the screen without upstaging Tom. She brings class to it. Not that Tom isn't classy, okay? Tom's very much Tom doing what Tom does at his best, I think. No one could steal Tom's thunder in this. And Tom is very good in this, no matter what my opinion of him is as the Doctor, okay? For me, in this one, with his performance, his comedic timing stands out. He has some wonderfully funny bits in this. He unusually pulls Garen in front of him when they're being threatened with execution, but then it's when the prince slaps him. Tom's mouth just drops open in feigned shock and disgust. So he slaps him back. I couldn't see what the object he used was though. Clearly, I couldn't see it. So if you know, please can you let me know in the comment section below. However, very well delivered, very funny. It was almost like it was an OTT reaction without it being OTT, if you understand what I mean. The Doctor has some brilliant smarts in this too, which plays into Tom's delivery strength. I like the bit where he hypnotizes the guard. That is very well within the reach of this version of the Doctor to do so. So I liked how that played out. It's also partly of what McCoy does, some of that, you know. Later also when the Doctor has infiltrated the guards, he is walking into the catacombs with them, and you see, I don't know if this was directed or intentional, I don't know, but you see his scarf poking out from underneath his clothing because it's so long. Love it. That's funny. And in line with his crazy, crazy scarf. One thing I don't like, and I think that this plays into the recklessness of the Doctor towards the end, is Vindicay is very clearly starting to lose his thread. He loses all his men down there. It's almost like he's a tyrant who has a wonderful, colourful backstory, but has PTSD. Without saying he has PTSD, obviously. He tries to blow up the Doctor, but the Doctor switches the thermite pack. Have I got that correct? Thermite pack? I think it is correct. For Jethric. Whilst I love the craziness of the prince, I'm not so keen on the Doctor doing that. I would rather the Doctor try to save the prince. Was he beyond saving, though? What do you think? All of the characters that we have here in this story are not really surplus to requirements. They kept the cast small for this, and that's a really good idea for this particular story, in my opinion, due to the fact that they were kept small. They all had an integral role to play and some kind of extensive background for character development, which we don't always get in Doctor Who. And that's a credit to Robert Holmes and how he wrote this. Robert Holmes is a fantastic writer, really. Every character in this has an element that is tied into the story, and they tie it in very well indeed. Sorry, Robert Holmes ties it very well into the story. Vindicate is painted as a villain of the story, as the villain, but the wonderful thing about his character is that we have to question if he truly is the villain of the story. He is traumatized. He is a tyrant, and he wants to buy the planet so that he can build an army to get his rightful throne back. He is only doing what he thinks is right. He was wronged. He ends up losing everything, and it makes him go off the charts. Sorry, does that make him a villain? I do wonder if he is. You can easily have sympathy for him because he was well, not even almost, he was manipulated by Garen and Unstoff. Goodness me, I'm taking this very seriously. But, it's got me right in the feels here. Could Garen be the true villain? I really adore the character. He is wonderfully witty, but he is a crook that instigated a lot of what happened here because he manipulated Vindicate into believing that Rebos was his to sell to him. Garen is entertaining, very much so. I will say that I did chuckle a fair bit in part 4 where he is hiding with Romana, and I don't think this is written into the story. I think this is just logistics of her costume. Okay, but his hood, Romana's hood, keeps getting in his face. He was doing everything within his power to get it out of his face without distracting too much as to what is going on. Now, obviously, I think I must have noticed that because, I pay attention to those smaller details because of the acting. I look at the acting perspective very much so. There's also something about part 3 that I don't quite like. It feels like at the start it's a bit of filler. I don't really like saying that. I just don't know why, but it does. There was also mention of ice gods. I'm guessing that was just there as a myth that they believed. It felt like a line that may have just ended up getting waylaid. It doesn't really matter, but it's just something that I noticed, okay? Another thing that I'm noticing a lot actually, and I bet this is why the Fifth Doctor loses it, is the sonic screwdriver is used multiple times. Tom's Doctor uses it a lot, I have noticed, and I think I will probably mention that more than once as I go on to review the other stories in this particular story arc. He uses it on the door, and I believe the crown jewels, that's too much. Get it gone, okay? Just get rid of it. The makeup or the puppetry, it's difficult to tell what they actually went for the Shavender. It's pretty gruesome. I like it very much, and it adds a decent amount of fear to what is essentially a historical piece set on a different planet. The cliffhangers are okay in this one. Okay, the first one being the best, where the Doctor and Romana get stuck under the door. My question is, did any of the cliffhangers leave you excited or nervous as to what was going to happen next? With me, kind of. I had the advantage, of course, naturally having not been born in the 70s, of not having to wait. The wonders of DVDs. I don't have Blu ray. I'm not very modern, sorry. However, there is one technical major cliffhanger that had to keep me on tenterhooks. Well, it's not really a cliffhanger. The story has a bit of an overarching plot. It was rare to have it back then, the most notable obviously being the war games. My favorite bit, which I haven't spoken about yet, obviously, is the beginning of the story. We have the entire setup to the overarching plot handed to us, and we are left. This is what I mean by the cliffhanger, okay? we are left to guess how they are going to find the pieces. That's the biggest cliffhanger of the lot, okay? And who the Black Guardian is, that's just as big as the pieces. The effects for the introduction of the White Guardian are my favorite part to this story. The echo on the voice is brilliant. The white bright light is brilliant. The introduction of the White Guardian thrills me more than it terrifies me. I actually really like the White Guardian and the Black Guardian, actually. Okay. You know that with that introduction, he is a very powerful being, and that you can tell when he speaks that too. You can hear it. Luckily, like the Black Guardian and some other villains, excuse me, he is not overused and has not been seen on TV. Thank goodness, since the classic era. Okay, the true Doctor Who era, and that's a good thing. That really is a good thing. The setup is so mysterious as well. The key to time is a perfect cube, which maintains the equilibrium of time itself. That one line that is spoken by the White Guardian, had I heard it as a child, I would have been fascinated, even more so perhaps, and I would have been sitting there on the edge of my seat going, yep, 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 what he said. Okay. I get a lot of that with classic. But the idea of the Doctor going on a massive space-time adventure across the cosmos to solve pieces of the big puzzle with the threat of the Black Guardian enthralls me. It's better than what we get today, because in Doctor Who we would have the occasional series where it would be an overarching plot. Well, I say that actually it happens on quite a regular basis. Excuse me, I lied. And then it would go back to, oh no, sorry, in Classic Who, it's occasionally we get the overarching plot and then it goes back to regular storytelling, unlike today where it's constant overarching plot. Something's got to keep us watching. I honestly think that the classic way of doing Doctor Who is the best way of doing Doctor Who, and I understand that it might not be something that would be feasible to go back to, but a similar format might be quite nice. And the fact that he has a locator, okay, I have said, and I do apologize, detector twice. I'm very sorry. Locator. 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 I hope that makes up for the times that I've said detector. And that Romana has given him the code to the key to time. That suggests that this adventure was most likely going to be his dangerous one yet. Love it, really. The Pirate Planet was written by Douglas Adams and it aired on 30th of September to the 21st of October 1978. Wow. The Doctor and Romana are now looking for the second segment for the key to time, and this time the segment is on a planet called Calufrax. The Doctor and Romana have trouble landing on the planet. However, when they do land, they discover that they are not on Calufrax, but instead they are on a planet called Zanuck. This planet is led by a captain who has led the planet since the death of Queen Zanzia, or at least that's what they think. In fact, the Doctor discovers what is really happening. He discovers that Zanzia was in fact still alive and was using time tams to try and transport her body into a new corporeal form. In this case, it was the captain's nurse, and she was controlling the captain, and he had plans put in place to try and stop her. However, they were not the best plans. He was trying to use the compressed planets to help him speed up the time in the TARDIS in order to off Zanzia. However, the Doctor discovers that that was completely wrong. The captain was luring her into a false sense of security, yes. However, in this case, in order to resolve the situation, the Doctor, once the captain is dead, switches the captain's circuits around to create a hyperspatial force shield around the shrunken planet, then put his dematerialization control into remote mode so that it can be operated from the TARDIS. The Doctor says he will dematerialize the TARDIS. Then he would make Zanuck dematerialize for a millisecond or two. Then he will invert the gravity field at the hyperspatial force shield and drop them into the hollow center of Zanuck, and it will expand in an instant to fill the hollow space and the planet Calufrax, which turns out to be the key to time segment, will be flung off into the vortex and they will collect it later in the TARDIS. Goodness me, I don't know how Tom Baker reeled all of that off. The Doctor is able to also give the inhabitants of Zanuck a new place to live. He also allows the Mentiads to blow up the bridge with mind control. And it leaves us to question what happens to the Queen and if the Doctor obtains the new segment. Okay, so I will start by saying I like this more than the first installment of The Key to Time. Now, normally, I prefer the historical, so that may sound really, really surprising to you that I've chosen the sci-fi one moreover than the historical one in this case. And the reason why is because this story, it challenges my mind quite a fair bit more than the previous one. Did anyone guess that the nurse was truly a bad person in this? I didn't. I really didn't. And that's all to do with the writing. However, I was suspicious of her. I would say that the twist when we found out when she was the queen and she was becoming more corporeal was completely unexpected. I did not expect that. The captain had been under complete control of the queen like this entire time. Really didn't. I thought seriously that the captain was the person that was the bad guy all along. This just goes to show that, making it less obvious really, really has an impact. And even when I watched it the second time around, I'd completely forgotten that the captain wasn't the main bad guy. I'd completely forgotten that. What I find intriguing about this was the way that they set up with the queen and they mention her from the very beginning. She's the great queen and all of that. And even though she's constantly mentioned, I still didn't expect it. She had many wars and then she died. Well, that's what they thought. I fell for that completely. The captain has taken over and rebuilt the planet because there's hardly any inhabitants left. So it was completely left field. So I really do praise the writing, I would say. And I praise the elusiveness. Is that the right word? Elusiveness, I suppose. I guess I could describe it as that, of the actress. Rosalind, I'm not sure how to pronounce that. My friend pronounced her as Rosalind, so maybe Rosalind Lloyd. She gave it a suspicion perhaps that you might think she wasn't all what she appeared to be, but she didn't really go beyond that until her reveal. I'm going to also talk about cliffhangers really early on in this video for me. I think the cliffhanger for part 3 at the end has to be one of my favorite cliffhangers from The Key to Time. It doesn't keep you guessing per se as to what exactly is going to happen with the Doctor. It's a good one because the Doctor's made to walk the plank, which is a typical pirate thing to do. So obviously we've got to have it in this one. And he falls as the captain shoots at his feet and he laughs, right? But it's the replay when that has the impact of the cliffhanger for me. It really hits home on the replay because you don't know how it's going to be resolved and you don't know if the Doctor is going to turn up. You think he has fallen over 1,000 feet and then suddenly he appears and reveals that he had in fact projected a hologram. It's a simple resolution. Is it a quick resolution? Yep, 100%. It's something that I also criticize with current Doctor Who for doing, but I think this is 100% in this case a very clever resolution to the cliffhanger. The second cliffhanger with the Mentiads saying, Doctor, we have come for you, and you wonder what's going to happen because you think that they are evil, but it turns out they're not. The second best cliffhanger, though, is obviously at the end of part 1, where you do think that the Mentiads are evil and they use their telepathic powers to make the Doctor pass out. And that particular part does really leave you guessing what is going to happen to the Doctor. And of course, obviously, Romana, because she gets arrested. So, and also, actually, the ending of this makes you guess. The entire ending to this story makes you guess, are they going to find the key to time segment in the time vortex? Are they going to find it? Because at this point, they haven't got it. And weirdly enough, I also like the fact that we don't see what happens to Queen Zanzia. It doesn't really confirm whether she is alive or dead. And I quite like that mystery, although I would say she's most likely dead. Now, the Mentiads have a very interesting backstory as well. I find them completely fascinating, and a lot of thought has been put into these characters. They're a form of gestalt, which is something that we don't see on a regular basis in Doctor Who. It's something that is not predominantly focused on. I just repeated myself, but there you go, I said it again. But when they do, I really like it because it gets really weird and you can do almost anything with them. In this case, it was all about shutting down the mind and the mind control using telepathic powers to penetrate into somebody else's mind because it enables the resolution to the story. And I think it's quite well done and very interesting and very nice bit of storytelling there. So they're not able to get into the engine room. So the Doctor decides to throw a spanner into the works. He uses a psychic link with the Mentiads and uses, I believe, what is supposed to be a spanner and destroys the machinery through that psychic link. Very clever resolution there. Very clever indeed. I've got to say, this is also probably one of Tom Baker's better performances for me personally at this particular time period in his run. By this point, he's been in it for quite a while. So the captain's secret trophy room has gravitech geometry. I think I've said that correctly. Now, Tom's reaction, he praises the engineering of what the captain has done, but he is unable to praise it because of the black hole. Obviously, I say Tom, it's obviously the Doctor. And the fact that it would end up offing people. The Doctor, obviously, in this case, behaves in a very doctorish way. He doesn't condone it, what the captain is doing, but at the same time, he's astounded by it. Sometimes I feel like with Tom Baker's performance, particularly in his later stories, he flies off the handle almost quite abruptly. Now, I know that's something that is well within the nature of the Doctor, and I just think sometimes it's too abrupt in his later stories. However, in this, he builds it up very nicely and he handles it very well. But, he's an actor, so I would expect him to. And I think the way that he handles the story is fantastic. And I think he's been given a lot of really, really good dialogue, actually, particularly in part 4, where the Doctor is explaining what he has done. And I did write that down in my script for this video, and you heard me say almost word for word earlier, just not as quick as Tom did it. He just rolls it off the tongue as if it's absolutely nothing, and he sounds incredibly intelligent whilst he's doing it. He plays it like the Doctor knew this all along, and he really knows what he is talking about. So when we are watching it, we are just sitting there and we are just nodding and smiling and saying, yeah, absolutely, Doctor, you hit the nail right on the head there. Absolutely, absolutely. I love his interaction with K9 as well at the beginning of part 3, because I love K9. I love K9 because the Doctor has sent K9 off with Mula and he gets captured or something along those lines anyway. But the Doctor asks when he turns up if K9 is amazed that he has turned up, and K9 says that he is, but he sounds completely unenthused by it. But he's a robot, so I will let him off. And John Leeson, he does a fantastic job voicing K9. Affirmative, love it. I do love K9, and I love his little bit of babble of scientific explanation to Mula after he accompanies her to save Pralix. It's just such a shame, really, that the robot gave them a fair bit of trouble. It's a shame, really, but he's good. I do like K9. I've got a lot of time for him. There's a lot of nice little touches in the story as well. But however, I say there's a lot of nice little touches. There's one bit that I'm not too keen on. And I don't know how I feel about it. And that's Romana being very cocky with the Doctor at the very beginning of this story, and how he is landing in the TARDIS, and how she wasn't necessarily believing that he was correct. I think, that was done on purpose because we need to see Romana learning to trust how the Doctor uses his instinct. And she has zero trust. She's very fresh out of her academy. So I don't really like it, but I understand why it's done. So I guess me not liking it is kind of irrelevant because it enables her to eventually trust the instincts of the Doctor and how he is, and it helps her to evolve into the later version of Romana that we see. A thing that was a nice touch is on the planet Zanuck, also towards the beginning. Doctor's asking questions. The public are ignoring the Doctor, and K9 says it's because Romana should speak to him, speak to the public because she's pretty. And then behind in the background, Romana's already speaking to the public. Love it. And the other wonderful touches are things like the Doctor using his bag of sweets to get the aircraft from the guard, or they're handing out jelly babies to the inhabitants of Zanuck. I will say, I don't like the Doctor using the sonic screwdriver. The fourth Doctor uses it an awful lot, I think. I will praise the fact that the Doctor couldn't get his sonic screwdriver, though, to get onto the bridge. He couldn't use it. It didn't work. Good job. That one I will praise. One thing that is very interesting to note is that at a little bit at the beginning and towards the end, we don't really get much talk of the key to time. And the segment, the Doctor is busy focusing on saving the population of Zanuck. So it's mostly like it's almost like the segment has been taken out of the main part of the story, which obviously is the key to time, but in this case, the pirate planet. But there's also no mention of the White Guardian. There's no mention of the Black Guardian's adversaries doing his bidding either, or the Detector. The only thing that really gets revealed is at the end of part 2 is the fact that the planet that they are on is Zanuck, and it's cold and it's wet and it's hollow, and that Zanuck is moved through space and lands on other planets to take the valuable minerals, which is a fantastic element to the story and obviously a very pirate thing to do. And the reveal that they were on Califrax all along was very shocking to me. There's lots of things that took me from left field here. I wouldn't have guessed. And the reason why I wouldn't have guessed is because at the end of part 2, it's well, not necessarily the end of part 2, but well, it's like, let me just put it like this. It's the fact that it's the Doctor's nature to not always land in the correct place in time or history, and he gets it off by X amount or X amount of years. So I was shocked with the ending of part 2 as well, and the fact that he did land it in the correct place. Do you understand what I mean? Yeah. The idea of space pirates as well, landing on the other planets to mine for the valuable minerals, is a fun concept, and the threat that they were going to potentially rob planet Earth of quartz probably would have installed fear on any young person watching this. They'd be like, oh my goodness, oh my goodness, are the space pirates coming? Are they coming to mine the Earth? Turn us into this compressed matter? Another nice touch is obviously we get to see the old Queen Zanzia, and that's integral, even though it's only for a couple of minutes that we see her, because she is alive, but she's suspended between the last few seconds of her life and death, which is not a pleasant way to live. This particular story plays around, really, in my opinion, it's just an opinion, with the idea of morality a fair bit, I think. It toys around with the idea of, would you actually want to be living to well over 100 years old, like the Doctor, but more withered, like Queen Zanzia? Or would you rather just pass on at the time in your life when you are where you have to pass on? Some people don't want to do that. Some people would like to live on, and some people are ready to go. It gets you thinking about that. In this case, with Queen Zanzia, she wasn't ready to go, so she ended up doing what she was doing. And obviously, that makes for a fantastic plot. I did write in my notes, though, that the actor Bruce Purchase, who plays the captain, was too loud. Now, this is obviously part of his character. And so he would have been directed to do that, be it through the director or through the script. Okay. However, I thought at first it was Brian Blessed. It was so loud. Okay. Now, obviously, it does work. It does work because it fits in with the concept of the character. But it's almost like, uh, let me explain. It's almost like it's a stage presence shouting rather than a I'm on TV type of shouting, because obviously those two different disciplines are very different to each other in many respects. In this on the stage, you have to make it more louder and like more explicit and how you express yourself. And with TV, you have to put it back and make it smaller. And I also will say that the camera shaking hurts my eyes a lot in this. I had to look away. I know it's part of the story, so it's fine. But for me personally, I was like, wow, there's a lot of shaking going on here. I think that this particular part of the key to time is all around very well put together story that sounds extremely intelligent. Tom Baker looks like he's having the time of his life. I don't know if he likes this particular story. I don't know, and I probably will never get the chance to ask him. I think he was on top form, and I like him better here than in the Rebus operation. I always say that wrong. I think I just said that wrong. I do apologize. But overall, it didn't need too many special effects. Yes, a lot of people do pass away in it, unfortunately. That happens in Doctor Who as part of the storytelling, but it got its point across about morality, and it got its point across about criminals such as pirates and the politics behind all of that as well. The Stones of Blood is the third installment to The Key to Time, which was written by David Fisher. It aired from the 28th of October to the 18th of November 1978. The Doctor and Romana are now looking for the third segment of The Key to Time. This time, the tracer locator, whichever one it's called, takes them to Earth. This marks Romana's first visit to the planet Earth, the Doctor's favourite planet. They end up in a place called Boscombe Moor, where a stone circle exists. These stones are important to the story, as K9 explains that some are silicon based. These stones feast on blood because they lack globulin. They discover, along with the help of Professor Rumford, that this druidic group had been worshipping Kalik. I do apologise if I say that wrong, by the way. A Celtic goddess who turns out to be Miss Fay. Miss Fay is an escaped convict. She escaped 4,000 years ago. She imprisons Romana, and the Doctor builds a machine to rescue her. Whilst on the ship, the Doctor accidentally releases the Megara aboard the hyperspace vehicle. They put him on trial, but the Doctor takes advantage of this and uses his verdict to off him to put her into the blasting system. He then convinces the Megara to read her memory cells, and they discover that she is an escaped convict, Cecile of Diplos. They need to imprison her, but before they do, the Doctor takes her necklace, which is the segment for the Key to Time. I I think that this one is my favorite out of the lot. Okay, it's not very action driven, which is fine. I think the basis for it being my favorite one is because of its historical relevance. Do you know what I mean? I mean, I like the history of Doctor Who anyway, which you should know, really, if you've been following now for long enough. I like listening to all the information that is being handed to us about the history, even if some of it is partly for storytelling more than anything else. I find that I like learning or watching things based on historic rituals. We get the archaeologist in the form of Professor Renfrew, played by Beatrice Beatrix Lehman, sorry. The character is a wonderful addition. She makes me think of Evelyn Smythe. She would have been an excellent companion. Beatrice obviously was 75 approximately at the time, and she did pass away the following year. So I understand that she obviously wouldn't be a companion. Age can be a factor. I find the older smart companion very intriguing. and Beatrice was a delight in this story. Maybe a good idea in the future to have an older companion, maybe not in their 70s, obviously, who is fascinated by history but still has enough questions for the Doctor. I love their interactions with each other when they are building this machine, and also the fact that the Doctor has massive trust in someone who seems to know who he was, but he wasn't entirely sure who she was. That he allowed her to use this clever machine to get him into that spaceship. A nice little touch. And that machine was also a very good plot device. I will also say that Mary Tam's Romana does that a lot in this one too. So I like that a lot as well. You know, has plenty of questions because obviously it's her first visit to planet Earth. Now, I must admit, I feel sorry for Mary Tam in this story. In fact, actually, I also feel sorry for Susan Engel as well. She is having to walk around in those shoes. Mary, sorry, is having to walk around in those shoes and in barefoot on that ground. Okay, that must have been horrible. And the costumes for Susan's Cecilia, sorry, of Diplos was, well, it looked uncomfortable to say the least. In danger of falling out. Let's put it like that. Okay. Thankfully, she gets quite an intriguing costume. Actually, it might explain why she doesn't move around a lot in her silver costume. Anyway, her costume, her crow costume, raven costume, whatever that is, kind of looks like the plague doctor masks. I can never remember what they're called. Or a play on it, to say the least. Let's put it like that. There are also some pretty good cliffhangers in this too. Miss Faye kind of has two of them, actually. She makes Romana disappear into hyperspace. This is good because it's one of those resolutions that does not happen quickly, and I don't always like it when the resolutions happen fast. The first cliffhanger is the best. It is ironically an actual cliffhanger. It lures Romana into a false sense of security with the Doctor's voice, and even the viewer too, I guess. I do wish that we could have seen the fake Doctor and maybe have some more mistrust installed onto Romana with the Doctor. It would have been good to see how they would have done that. And obviously showing the person, obviously in this case Miss Faye, using the key to time, how it was used. We also have Miss Faye telling them that they are trapped in hyperspace as part of the cliffhanger, which I like because it ends in a scaled shot of the spaceship. Those scaled models, I will say, are some of the most best things that happen on Doctor Who, and it's always worth it. It's very practical, and sometimes it just shows that you don't need a lot of CGI. For example, the time vortex. I'm guessing that it was the time vortex anyway. That's a brilliant shot. I did want to see them getting the second segment. I will say that it would have been a lot better than what was going on in part 4. I felt like, okay, some of the parts with the Megara were more than just a little bit extended. Let's just put it like that. It was needed, of course, for the story, but it was a little bit too long in comparison to the rest of the pacing for the story, and that's the issue that I have. It was funny through parts of the scene. This story again plays into the humour of Tom. The idea that the Doctor was saved by the Megara, but then found guilty and sentenced to be offed anyway, makes me chuckle. I find that really funny. He has some wonderfully funny interactions with K9, as does Romana, actually, who tells K9 to forget telling her about tennis, so he erases it from his memory banks instead. He is just so literal. Yet later on, he says something along the lines of, well, the Doctor, sorry, this says something along the lines of, you always wanted to be a bloodhound. K9 wasn't having it. He kept saying negative, 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 negative. He didn't want to be a bloodhound. I do like the interaction later on after the Doctor and K9 get attacked by the Ogre as well. K9 gets his innards destroyed by the Ogre and the Doctor takes it very badly. He doesn't cry. However, Tom does imply that there may have been a tear in his eye that we couldn't see. So he wipes it away with his scarf. He hides it. Note how it's done, Mr. Gatwa. Okay, note how it's done. Oh, you left. Pretty irrelevant. Okay. Now, the Ogre do provide a fair bit of action. It's that situation of an inanimate object coming to life again in Doctor Who. How to install fear into children. Brilliant. Just shows stones coming to life on Doctor Who and drinking the red gloopy stuff. I'm talking in code here, that pumps throughout the veins. I'm talking in code because I already have a warning. I love the way that these ogres are handled as well. I like the fact that there are 3 to defeat, one for each 3 parts of the story. Tom becoming a matador is incredibly funny and an ingenious bit of unexpected writing. The Megara serving a much better purpose in destroying the second one as well. I like how they did the effects with the Megara, now that I'm thinking about the Megara again. You can tell that they had a tight budget, which is fine. All right, there's nothing wrong with that. They used whatever resources they had and they keep the effects very simple indeed. And that's good. I think it's also a good idea to show a sacrifice. And I thought the Doctor was the apt choice to participate in it, even though I don't agree with making human beings a sacrifice. I think that is wrong. Don't do it. That kind of plot driven centric device is always a must in Doctor Who. Because the Doctor, even though he can regenerate, he can still lose his life. So, with regards to storytelling, YouTube, with regards to storytelling, okay, I approve of it, okay, for the purpose of the story, and that the Kalik demanded it. We, the viewer, are lured quite a fair bit into a false sense of security, almost. We hear about the fact that there are only 9 travellers, but more stones, which sow the seeds of how the other stones got there. And obviously, then we've got the mystery of the missing paintings. Now, we do love us a priest hole in Doctor Who, don't we, darlings? I like how the priest hole is used in this. The mysteries of the crows and the ravens are somewhat important to how the story unfolds. They also add darkness to it all. Now, I had already guessed that Miss Fay was the one behind the mask, performing the rituals. However, I didn't guess that she was also Lady Montcalm, Signora Chimera, and Miss Trefusis. I think I've said that correctly. And that she had been on Earth for over 4,000 years. And she was the Kalik. Sorry. That was quite a twist. And I love the fact that the twist got bigger and bigger. And we discovered that the Megara was after her. Now, the Doctor, with that, well, that was more than just a bit reckless, I think. He took a huge risk. He took the risk and it paid off, unlike today's Doctor. Learn, Russell T Davies. Learn. We find out she is the criminal from Diplos in Tau Ceti. The Doctor couldn't have known that it was going to work. It was pure deduction, in my opinion, which I think is also another reason why it makes it reckless. But I suppose reckless more in a good way because it didn't involve in his companion being in danger, right? Can I justify that? I don't know. So, The Key to Time is not one of my favourite stories, but one thing that they have in common throughout all the different stories in the story arc is the wording that they use. I have found something on these rewatches so far where I feel like what they're saying, what the Doctor is saying, is just brilliant because the wording is just apt choices. In this case, for this story, it's the Megara. Okay, so they discover, obviously she's not Vivian Fay, Miss Fay. They discover she is Cecile of Diplos, and she is guilty of the theft and misuse of the Great Seal of Diplos, also removing silicon-based life forms from the planet in contravention of Article 7594, and obviously she is employing everything for her own ends. It's like fabulous wordings. Obviously, that was not a direct quote, it was just part of it. Through the twists and turns of this story, I also did not realize that she had the third segment either. Okay, although they do keep reminding us throughout that they are looking for the third segment, unlike the previous story. It took the second watch to realize that she may have been the adversary for the Black Guardian that they keep making a reference to, or they had made a reference to in the first part of the story, to the key to time. I love it when things like that happen. You you get it on a later watch, you know what I mean? You miss it first time around, but you get it. And the fact that it was the necklace, that was left field for sure. Okay. And then, of course, her imprisonment is turning her into stone. That I can imagine would freak any child out, I would say. Now, this story is easily my favorite story from The Key to Time. The Androids of Tara is the next installment from The Key to Time. It was written by David Fisher and it aired from the 25th of November to the 16th of December 1978. The Doctor wants a break from looking for the key to time segment, but Romana makes him go to where the next segment is, the planet Tara. The Doctor refuses to go. He doesn't want to. He wants to go fishing instead, so Romana goes. She finds the segment very, very easily indeed, but she ends up meeting Count Grendor after she was attacked, who shows an interest in the segment. Romana has twisted her ankle in the attack, so the Count takes her for so-called treatment. The Doctor, who was fishing, also gets captured, so everyone's getting captured in this, by the Prince's guard. The Doctor is asked to repair an android prince. The android is going to be used to create a diversion at the coronation because the Count wants the throne that the prince is next in line for. If the prince is coronated as king directly, then he most likely will be offed. This doesn't go according to plan. The doctors, the prince, and the guards all drink wine. Did I say the doctors? I meant the Doctor, the definite article. They all drank wine. However, it was laced and they conked out. They fell asleep. When they wake up, the prince was gone, but the android was left. So they take the android and they go ahead and they infiltrate the castle, and the android is crowned as king. Meanwhile, Romana finds out that there is a double of her. Well, not a double, but someone who looks like her, the Princess Strella. She is the princess to marry the prince. The Count intends on marrying her and claiming the throne, though, which would then mean making him king, even if that means using Romana as a decoy. Is the Doctor able to save Romana, restore order to Tara, and find the segment once again before the worst happens? Now, of course, he does. Now, with all the reviewing I have done this week, I am not expecting this one to be long. I'm trying to keep it concise. I've had one big week of reviewing this week. This one has a reasonable pace to it. I think sometimes with the Key to Time stories, the pacing, well, it can be a bit funny, can't it? I do like the pacing in this one. I have a little bit of a critique about it, but we'll get into that later. Yes, there is a fair bit of discourse to it, but I will say that it is the type of story that I was referring to the other day when I mentioned the pacing of the war between the land and the sea. Have conversation, a bit of action, then more conversation, and the whatnot, rather than talk, and, well, talk. This is what that story does, so I approve of that. I also noted that there seems to be, and I think I must have forgot this, quite a few stories that are seemingly historical based in the Key to Time, or at least stories that are set on other planets but appear to be somewhat historical, or the costumes, which I really like in this, have a historical base. Now, I like it. I do like that. And if you've been here a long time, I like the history Doctor Who's as opposed to the sci-fi ones, and I still love the sci-fi ones. It's just I like the history because I can connect to it very well. I only have one major negative. Well, not major really, it's probably quite slight given what we've reviewed just recently. But in the context of Classic Who, I suppose it is a major one. That's the fact that the Doctor is well, he's very blasé, isn't he, about finding the fourth segment. Now, I know it was a plot driver, so it was intentionally done. It was just, I don't know if it was uncanny or whatever it was for the Doctor to do that, but, mind you, though, now that I say that and I think about it, there are quite a few moments in this particular series, The Key to Time, where the Doctor has been slightly out of character. He's quite jokey throughout all of this. I think this is probably the least jokiest we've seen him so far in The Key to Time. However, having said that, that was the only major thing that was out of character for the Doctor. Everything else that he does in this particular story was in character for him. It puts today's Who to shame. For example, at the end of part 4, the Doctor knocks the crossbow out of, what's his name? Farah's hand. Sorry, I forgot. Because the Count has taken Romana, and he obviously didn't want Romana to get hit with a stray arrow. That would have been very bad. Don't do it, people. Don't do it. That is very much something that the Doctor would do, which is quite something, because you are left wondering with this cliffhanger, how on earth is the Doctor going to save Romana? Of course, this leads to probably what I think is one of the better sword fights in Doctor Who. One of the things that the Doctor does in the classic era is it creates a lot of fights, but it struggles with time, right? Do you know what I mean? Okay, I think I do. Time, it was one of the biggest issues back then. They had a deadline to be finished filming by, and all of that. So the sword fight was, for the time, extremely well rehearsed. Sometimes when watching the show, you can tell where they perhaps lacked in rehearsals or perhaps lacked in filming time, because I think it was at 10 p.m. they had to be out of the studio by, and the lights would just go off. But I think here you can tell that they were rehearsed in comparison to other fights where the conviction is not as solid. There was very clear intentions behind this fight. So that's great. Also, the Doctor has a very valid reason to do so. I can't believe I just said that, but he does. He is not a weapon wielder naturally, but he, in this situation, is not given a lot of choice. But he does not cause harm or injury. In fact, the defeat of the Count was not something I expected, that's for sure. And I found it quite entertaining that he escapes via the water instead, and the Doctor returns his helmet to him. That's very kind of you, Doctor. Very kind. Speaking of the Doctor, I thought he was pretty careless of okay. Yeah, the Doctor, fourth Doctor, he was pretty careless with K9. He decided to leave a robot dog in a boat on water guarding an entrance. I laughed out loud when we discover at the end that K9 had floated off because he can't control the boat. He had no hands. And I just thought it was fun. Master! On the water. I just thought that was funny. But it was a tad irresponsible of leaving an electronic dog floating on water when it could have overturned at any moment. Anyway, that being said, the Doctor has, as usual, some fantastic smarts in this. He is able to infiltrate the castle on several occasions, one in order to save Romana and the other to get the android of the prince into the castle. The way Tom handles himself in this story with those smarts is wonderful. His temperament is probably at his nicest in this story, I think. I will say that this is definitely a story about betrayal and hierarchy politics. The idea that treason will be committed in order for the Count to become the king for us Brits, in reality, could be very much a real possibility indeed. It's a way of showing us the dangers behind it all without being pushy. A tyrant trying to claim the throne. It wouldn't be the first time that sort of thing has happened. This is also what I mean as well about integrating politics naturally. I've mentioned it plenty of times when covering Doctor Who on the channel, and it's been subject for discussion this week as well. Whilst it is something that we can relate to in this case, it isn't set on Earth. It's set on Tara, where they have electric swords and androids. So therefore, because of the sci-fi aspect, it becomes a little less real. and personal, and more about the escapism first and keeping you on tenterhooks and focusing on the storytelling. And if you don't get the politics behind it, you don't get the hierarchy or the tyranny or the treason or anything like that, that's not, in this case, a massive issue. You've been entertained, and that is first and foremost the priority, which who quite often forgets these days. The cliffhangers I have already mentioned one, and I like the cliffhanger at the end of part one where the doctor, the prince, and the guards drink the wine and they pass out. All right, this would leave a viewer wondering what on earth is going on and if the doctor would be taken and put in prison. However, that doesn't happen. The cliffhanger, though, for part two is probably the cliffhanger that got me the most. And I have the advantage of watching it immediately after, should I choose to do so. It was when the doctor, who appears to be acting out of character, took the scepter and attacked Strella. Well, at this point, we're not actually sure if it is Strella or if it was Romana. And of course, it turns out to be the android. But the palpitations, oh my goodness, Doctor, please. I don't. I thought it was Romana when I first watched it that he was doing that to. I thought maybe she had been put in place of Strella instead. What did you think of that bit? Please do let me know in the comment section below. I'd be very interested to hear what you all thought about that bit. I really like the idea with the androids. I wish they used them a bit more in Modern Who. I really do. Yes, I don't like mannequins, all right? But for the most part, it is the actors performing, thank goodness. I like the idea of double Romana. It gave Mary Tam a bit more to do. Not that she is surplus to requirements in any way, shape, or form. She really isn't. She just needed a bit more to do because the character of Romana at this point wasn't being as fleshed out as much as she possibly could have been. Which, I suppose that's not a massive issue, as quite often the companion does not have much of a backstory or character development in Doctor Who. We don't really see a massive progression until we get to Ace. I know Joe Grant has progression, and there are other characters that do, but Ace is really the first big progression that we get. Whilst I think it shouldn't be done too much today, because they do need to pull back on it, I always felt like the classic companions could do with a bit more of a push. But, they have their role. Their role is there to be the eyes into the TARDIS and ask questions, and they serve their purpose for us, the viewer. I still like the fact, though, that Romana takes the initiative as expected of her. I like the idea of evil android Romana. It makes it quite dark. Do we need to be told what was going to happen? Yes and no. I don't think it made a massive impact being told what was going to happen. However, I think the impact would have been bigger if we had not known. Like I said, though, it really doesn't matter. But I think it would have been a bit more fun for the sort of, impact and all of that to watch. Maybe think it is the real Romana trying to do something. The evil Romana is an excellent plot device, and she is obviously there so that she can effectively now get close to the king. Now, the Count is quite interesting. Speaking of the king, we're talking about the Count now. He is snide, he is manipulative, he is very well played by Peter Jeffrey. What is funny, though, is that I don't get a sense of he is inherently evil. I don't think he's played that way. He is cunning, and he is clever, but not clever enough for the Doctor. Is he the perfect enemy of the Doctor? No. But he is dangerous enough by being power hungry to make the Doctor want to stop him. The Doctor even twigs that the Count has set up a trap for him. And those kind of like under the skin type of characters, they can really get to you. They can really get into your mind sometimes a little bit more than when you go for the full on scary monster type of character. These little traps and twists serve very well for the pacing of the plot. For example, the first major thing was Romana was attacked by a beast and the Count saves her. We are immediately trusting of him because he saves Romana, only for us to experience betrayal almost immediately. The androids are set up very well as well for their plot devices. Their purpose is to drive the plot forward, and it does so well. Could we have seen some more androids? Quite possibly. I think it could have afforded that. The Doctor expertly takes advantage of these androids, and I love that. It's not overly complicated or anything like that, which is absolutely fine. You can do that in Doctor Who. We just see them serve a purpose. I think one thing I would have liked to have seen more of is the pushing of the marriage a bit more. I think it could have started a lot earlier, even though I am fine with the pacing overall. I think it could have been pushed to see the Count marrying Romana. It's not that big of a deal, it's just an idea. But, you could have gone there, you could have taken the risk, but it's okay. I also love K9. I love K9. Oh, he's one of my favourite companions. I know. He's a bit like Marmite for people. You either like him or you don't. But the zapping of the arms and getting stranded on the boat in the water is highly amusing to me. He also plays chess very well indeed. And I also like that he realised that the android Romana was not real. I also think that would have been entertaining as well, now I think about it, to have a battle with android Romana. That would have been so cool. Anyway, I also like the props of the electric swords. The effects for those were very good indeed. There were not many special effects used in this, so it was nice to have some special effects. These props were used a fair amount, but they were not overused. They really weren't. Overall, the pacing for this story is very good, and the story is in itself quite interesting and a nice segue into the next one. The Power of Kroll was written by Robert Holmes and it aired from the 23rd of December 1978 to the 13th of January 1979. It was, by today's standards, what you would call and define as a Christmas story without worrying about including Christmas and snow and all these dancing fairies in it. It is the fifth installment of The Key to Time before the grand finale, the penultimate story for this particular story arc. This story is set on the third moon of Delta Magna. The story opens on the RV Rutan, otherwise known as Research Vessel Rutan, and the crew were working on the methane mines. Thorn joins them, and the Doctor and Romana, of course, naturally land in the swamps. Romana goes to search for the segment for the key to time, and the Doctor remains where he is. Romana is captured and drops the tracer. The Doctor is shot at and is taken prisoner to the RV vessel. The Doctor establishes very quickly that they are on a methane vessel and what the crew are doing. He gives them some tips, and whilst they don't trust him entirely, they pretty much leave him be, which is quite unusual. Meanwhile, Romana is going to be made a sacrifice to Kroll, a mythical being in the Swampies' history. The Doctor can hear everything that is going on outside, and he makes it his priority to go and rescue Romana, as we would expect. We unfortunately don't get to see his escape. At least I don't recall seeing it. I might have that wrong. Right? However, he does save Romana from a Swampy dressed up as a Kroll. Brilliant. The crew of the RV Rutan accidentally wake up Kroll as well. The Doctor discovers a well. He goes down into the well and finds a large history book. In the book, he discovers that it is the history of the tribe. In it, he explains, he reads that Kroll had been awakened and saw that people had become fat and indolent. He became angry and struck them down. He swelled into them the symbol of his power and offed all that were in the temple. The lamentation of the people was so great that Kroll returns to the water where he slept. That was the third manifestation of Kroll, and the Doctor deduces that Kroll is most likely due another manifestation, which we do get almost immediately after. In fact, the Doctor also deduces that a lot of the RV Rutan crew were eaten by Kroll, which is why they were never found. The RV crew have picked up Kroll on the scanner just before Harg is taken off as fish food for Kroll. The Doctor and Romana are once again captured and are sentenced to be offed. They are placed on the execution rack and have creepers attached to them that function a bit like a torture rack. The creeper pulls back as they dry out, and they are underneath a window. It starts raining, and the Doctor is able to somehow produce a high frequency scream that breaks the glass. The Doctor is able to free Romana and Radat, who is obviously then shortly after taken off by Kroll because he is moving and Kroll is sensitive to movement. The RV routine crew are attempting to fire a rocket as well to stop Kroll. Well, Thorne is overseeing that and he is met with resistance naturally. So he deals with that resistance by himself and then tries to follow through on the rocket. Now, can the Doctor stop them from doing so, firing that rocket, get the fifth segment to the key to time before they destroy Kroll and the Swampies? So this is not a favourite of mine. I don't know if that is because I have such a high expectation of a Robert Holmes story. It's a possibility, and I will acknowledge that. I had completely forgotten, though, that Robert Holmes had written for The Key to Time. It's one of the closest in this story arc to a complete sci-fi story. That being said, even though I'm not the biggest fan of it, I have very few negatives for it. This story sees the return of Philip Maddock as Fenner. I've got to say this, I don't often watch the credits at the end. I just let them roll and finish off writing and whatever. Now, why didn't they just ask him to come in and be a companion at this point, or a main villain adversary? He's been in it several times and he continued to work on Doctor Who throughout his life. It's quite nice to have him in it, though. He isn't really a villain in this so much. Quite a few of his Doctor Who credits were villains, whilst his character isn't probably participating in something that should be happening. He wasn't or manipulating situations in any way, going on trial, participating in a trial, or creating insane monsters at the destruction of a brain. In fact, it took me a couple of episodes to suddenly go, oh, hang on a minute, that's Philip Maddock. Shows you how adaptable to makeup he is as well, actually. Mind you, this is the second time I've also seen the power of Kroll, so it wasn't surprising that I didn't realise it was him at first. And it is good to have him working with Tom Baker again, and it's always good to have him in Doctor Who, full stop. Robert Holmes pulled back the humour in this a little bit for Tom. I think that makes perfect sense. The Key to Time does give the Doctor quite a bit of a comedic streak, which is fine because Tom makes it work and it fits kind of well with his Doctor, I would say. But the comedic streak did need pulling back on. And I know that some of you probably have a few qualms about the comedic streak with the Doctor in this. And having the Doctor leap back into action a bit more makes perfectly good sense. So we thankfully get to see that. The Doctor has some great heroic moments in this. This is a mark of a Robert Holmes story and his complete understanding of what it is within the brief that the Doctor needs to be seen doing. His biggest priority in this is being the hero. That's one of the Doctor's priorities, biggest one. And keeping the companion safe wherever he can. And if the companion gets captured or ends up in any sort of danger, then the Doctor prioritizes saving his companion. And obviously there's obstacles that he's got to get to and get through whilst he's doing that. We've got some good little jump scares where Romana is taken by the Swampies. They just appear out of nowhere, and the Doctor's hat, well, it gets kaboomed off his head, and he gets carted off as well. The Doctor doesn't know anything about Romana being taken, but when he has a sneaking suspicion that she is the sacrifice, of course, he makes it his absolute priority to save her, even if that means violence. And I don't condone that. Using violence is wrong anyway. I expect the Doctor, though, to make the companion the priority. And he does. What I don't like is that we don't see the Doctor, escape in order to do this, unless I missed it. And I do acknowledge that that could be a complete possibility. I'm not sure if it was written or not, or if it didn't make the cut, whichever, or it's just my eyes not remembering anything or my brain not remembering anything. If that's not the case, then it's a minor plot hole. It's not that big of a deal, but I noticed it. All right, let's just put it like that. However, I love the desperation without sounding frantic from Tom. He wants to save her. Tom handles it very well. In fact, Tom handles a lot of the story very well indeed. He is so blasé about the execution rack, isn't he? And passing away, dying, which I think ties in well with the Doctor. It wouldn't surprise me that the Doctor does not worry too much about dying, and not because he can regenerate. Even with regeneration, he can still die. It's more like if you've lived for over 700 years, which he does actually mention in this story, it's something that can seem very minor indeed, I would have thought. And the genius of the Doctor throughout, like in the execution scene, that's clever, very clever. Not execution, don't like execution, don't condone that either. But sometimes the predictability in the current Who is way too much. It makes it mundane. This is the situation that he is in. No sonic screwdriver. Both he and Romana are tied up. Plus, their only ally is K9, who is held, well, not held to ransom in the TARDIS, but he's blocked in the TARDIS because of the swamp. So, how is he going to get out of it? Never in a million years did I expect to see the Doctor to create wave frequencies with his voice. It might have happened in a story that I haven't seen, that's a possibility, but it just came out of the blue. This is why I argue for not having the sonic screwdriver, because it allows for the creativity. And I won't deny that it is more than just a bit bizarre having the Doctor make that kind of sound. It's a bit weird, but I'm here for it. You'll notice it isn't a plot device that other writers have frequented, though. Maybe because it was more than just a little bit odd, but hey, it worked for the story. It's still a genius move by the Doctor because they are in peril and having their bones pulled and cracked, and that's not a great way to go. And they have no other friends that can save them. In fact, that whole scene is probably my favourite scene in the story, along with the history book scene. Now, I have been talking about information dumps, okay? Great big information poops with the current spin off. This is also an information dump, so I'm bringing it up. The War Between the Land and the Sea info dump was a very long scene. It was probably about, I don't know, 5 minutes? I don't like information dumps being done like that. In fact, this information dump for the power of Kroll is probably less than a minute. It wasn't too long, and it was essentially Kroll has appeared 3 times before. It offloaded the people before returning to the water, and we are due to get a Kroll manifestation. This all ties in with the earlier plot point of the RV crew picking up something on the large scanner, and also the Doctor is able to figure out that is where the crew have disappeared to, because the crew have lost a lot of their men and they don't know what happened. And all with that, in that like 1 minute or less, we know exactly what Kroll is about and that he has appeared before the Swampies and he is coming back, which shortly after we do get to see. And we get to see it more than once. What a fantastic couple of shots we get, which also explains why some of the other stories from The Key to Time have the special effects pulled back or are pretty much non-existent. They spent a lot of money here for this one, I think, and it does pay off. Kind of makes me wonder if Robert Holmes dove into Scandinavian folklore for this and based Kroll on the Kraken, but renamed him Kroll because the basis for it was slightly different. The shots of Kroll is kind of, well, it's Carnival of Monsters type of shot, a scaled overlay. You can tell that's what it is. Obviously, it's a time period that they're working in. They don't have the resources that they do today, but it still works and creates the effect that you are wanting to get, and it's really well done. We get some pretty good jump scares with Kroll. Kroll is determined to give us nightmares. Thank you. That cliffhanger with Hug being dragged off into the pipe by Kroll is excellent. I must say that the mechanics of that be it the staging, some kind of puppetry, or the acting, really did make it look like he was being dragged into the pipe. Very cleverly done. Cole is also being very unpredictable. He senses that those movements and reacts on that, and that leads to some fantastic shots as well at the end of part 3 when the Doctor and Romana are escaping. Those jump scares overshadow, unfortunately, the first cliffhanger when Romana is a sacrifice, and we have those giant pincers moving towards her with the fake Kroll and the Swampy. Now, part 4 is really where the jeopardy truly begins in this. Well, I say truly begins. Kroll does offer a lot of jeopardy, but this part is like bam, 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 bam. All right, almost New Who like, but better. It's very suspenseful. We learn that Thorn is not all who he is cracked up to be, and would quite happily off the Swampies in order to fulfill the duty of the crew. Was that predictable? Did you get that? I kind of did. I sensed that he wasn't all that he appeared to be at the beginning. In this part, he's quite an abrasive character that is also like a megalomaniac or even an extreme narcissist. He doesn't really have to do all that much, but his desire to overpower people comes into play in this particular part. Thorn gives the Doctor a lot to do in part 4. I wouldn't deny that. The Doctor prioritizes from switching saving Romana to saving the Swampies. Obviously, by that point, he's got Romana, so of course, well, duh, Rachel, state the obvious. But anyway, he prioritizes then saving the Swampies from Thorn. And I don't know if this was a stereotype of just hitting it with a hammer, but the Doctor disables the rocket by hitting the box with a hammer. I quite like it. It's a bit silly and a bit ingenious, but it moves the story along. It got the job done. Hey ho, there you go. Spaghetti-O. Now, we are left wondering on how on earth is the Doctor going to solve the problem of Kroll destroying the base at this point, because by this point he's ripping it to shreds. And this is where I have a negative, and it's a recurring negative that I have about the key to time in general. There has been next to no mention of the 5th segment in this story. It's almost like the writers forget that they are looking for the 5th segment or the segments in this story, and it gets shoehorned in at the end like it's an afterthought. Now, that's not my favourite way of dealing with that, really. However, the fact that the Doctor deduced that Kroll must have swallowed it and therefore had become the 5th segment is pretty cool. That I didn't see coming. And there was no apparent quick resolution. And the fact that there is jeopardy right up until the last few minutes is fantastic. The computer is going to fire a shot around rockets again because it's programmed to do that and it won't stop. So that leaves the Doctor with one final chance to save the day before he leaves. He does something that is exceptionally dangerous, and that is touching electrical wires altogether. Don't ever do that, people. Okay? Don't ever do that. Not that I need to tell you that. The Doctor was thinking on his feet, and he got very, very lucky indeed. What he did was very dangerous. Now, there are just 2 more things that I want to highlight as a slight negative. I think they could have dressed the Swampies in a bit more of a suitable costume to perhaps avoid a side moon. That though is more of a personal preference for me personally. Okay. In the grander scheme of things, it probably doesn't matter. And I would say that perhaps follow up on the beginning point where Thorn arrives and they say about the dot that was coming in. I'm gathering that was the TARDIS, right? I'm not just being completely dumb. I'm guessing that is the TARDIS. Please, have I got that right? Please, Whovians, help me out. Overall though, whilst this is not the best story from Robert Holmes, it does come with what I expect from him: drama, tensions, and jump scares, which will lead us up into the next serial from The Key to Time. The Armageddon Factor was written by Bob Baker and Dave Martin. It aired from the 20th of January to the 24th of February 1979, and it marks the final installment of The Key to Time and the final appearance of Mary Tam as Romana. There is a war going on between Atrios and Zeos. It's not particularly clear as to why the war is going on, unless I missed it. However, we see the Marshal ordering things like strikes and other commands. We are also introduced to Princess Astra, played by Lala Ward, and Merrick, the love interest of Princess Astra. Princess Astra goes to visit her people in the hospital wing, but is taken and put into the radiation cell at the request of the Marshal, who seems to be under the control of someone else. Astra is then taken to what Romana refers to as the planet of evil, which is the third planet between Atrios and Zeos. The Doctor and Romana discover that the next segment for the Key to Time is on Atrios, so they make their way there. However, they do not land on Atrios at first, and they remain in space. They get seen on the scanner by the Marshal, and he shoots a nuclear warhead at the TARDIS. The Doctor dematerializes the TARDIS onto the Atrios, I think it's a ship, to avoid the warhead. The Doctor, Romana, and K9 go to hunt for the next segment. However, they discover that Princess Astra is in the radiation cell. The Doctor and Romana, however, do get caught by the Marshal. K9 goes into hiding and he takes them off for questioning. However, they are able to escape with the help from K9 and the use of the dog whistle, and they try to get back to the TARDIS only to discover that it is gone. K9 is ordered to open the door to find Astra. She is not there. Merrick wants to find her because he loves her. However, he goes off with Romana and the Doctor, leaving K9 to guard that wall. However, he is lured into the recycling chute. The Marshal is attempting to get the Doctor to help him with the war efforts. The Doctor is reluctant, as expected with the Doctor, and then decides to cut him a deal. He recommends peace as a deterrent to war, and he wants Marshal to find Princess Astra. We also see that the Marshal is communicating with a black box attached to his neck. He is told that the Doctor should not die yet. The Shadow is communicating via a skull with the Marshal. The Doctor eventually ends up on Zeos and ends up being tortured by the Shadow, who wants the Key to Time segments. He is the minion of the Black Guardian, it turns out, which is quite a reveal. He wants the other 5 pieces, as he already has the 6th piece, which turns out to be Princess Astra. The Doctor also discovers that there are no Zeons on Zeos. He also discovers a machine called Mentalis, which is controlling the war. Mentalis gets disabled, and Marshal decides that he is going to launch the nuclear warhead at Zeos. The Doctor and Romana decided to create a fake segment to the Key to Time to get him stuck in a time loop with the universe. Can the Doctor retrieve the final segment for the Key to Time with the help of Romana, Drax, K9, Shap, Merrick, and save Princess Astra and defeat the Black Guardian at last? Well, that is quite a long synopsis, so I ended up having to sort of consolidate it down there a little bit. I do apologise. But the answer is yes, he can. So this is the finale that puts RTD to shame, kind of. But that's not hard these days, really, is it, to be honest with you? The Armageddon factor is good, but it does have a lot of weaknesses as well. I will say that the story highlights, I think, an issue that I find with the series all the way throughout. I don't necessarily think it's an issue here, though. What the writers have done is they've made sure in this particular story is to have the story revolving entirely around the segment. Now, the other stories result in the Doctor and Romana obtaining the segment, but there doesn't seem to be any main adversary, no apparent main agent of the Black Guardian, and you have to try and figure out who it could have been, and no constant reminder that they were looking for the segment. Here, whilst this story is not a favourite of the bunch, for me personally, the writers remain sure to keep the segment as the priority focus and have the Shadow working against the Doctor, which I think personally is something that is really paramount to the plot. I think that the Shadow appearing throughout each location would have been a good idea. In a different form, played by the same actor trying to overthrow the Doctor in each story where they were trying to get the segment would have been a great idea. It would have offered perhaps more consistency and more focus on the mission that had been set by the White Guardian for the Doctor and Romana. We also get the first mention of the Black Guardian, well, which we get for quite a while, actually, now that I think about it. I think that we needed more of that throughout the series. One thing that I note is that, although I haven't done it yet, and it has won the vote most recently, the Black Guardian trilogy, excuse me, probably does a better service to the Guardians in general. We have this talk and big threat of this otherworldly power in the form of the Guardians for the key to time, yet we barely have any time with them whatsoever. And the finish of the Black Guardian via a screen is done and dusted within no time at all. Everything that has been going on has been leading up to this point. The Black Guardian should have been introduced several parts earlier if you're not going to introduce him immediately. And the Guardians in general should have had more screen time. It's quite a bugbear for me in this particular story arc. The ending of it as well is a bugbear of mine. The Doctor restores the balance, but then breaks the tracer and scatters the keys again, the segments again, to defeat the Black Guardian. Restores Astra and fits a randomizer onto the TARDIS so that they can leave without the Guardian finding them ever. Over just like that. It's not the best of conclusions, I won't lie to you, to a very long story. It didn't feel rushed or anything per se. It was just, oh, well, that was that. That was it. There wasn't enough assertive dominance from the Guardian, and whilst it is in the Doctor's nature to do what he did, it was just done and dusted and over with within a few minutes. The most interesting thing, though, is that probably Mary Tam has the best performance as Romana in this story, in this particular scene that I have just spoken about. Romana lectures the Doctor over the fact that it would be their fault if Merrick dies and the fact that Princess Astra is dead. I would say that's a fair enough lecture because that to her would have been quite a massive shock and her first real experience of perhaps what it is truly like traveling with the Doctor when things like that happen. And weirdly, I think the Doctor deserved it a little bit. I think that Mary handles herself very well in that scene. Now, I don't know if Mary had decided to leave at this point or not, whether it was after or not, I don't know. But it was probably her defining moment. She pretty much knew what she was doing as Romana anyway. But I think this outburst added an interest to the character, which I personally don't think was really carried through with Lala Ward's Romana later, which is a shame, really. But, I suppose that was the way classic actually functioned in those days. Now, it I can't remember off the top of my head if it was her or the Doctor that mentions that the Guardians should not have that type of power. This is something that should have been a constant mention throughout. Speaking in the reality, the idea that someone has the control of the cosmos in that sense, with keeping an equal balance, is quite a creepy idea. It's like the good and evil in politics. There's always something that controls what is happening around us, whether or not it is good or bad. And it's quite creepy when you apply that idea to reality. The Doctor seems to be more like the Tom Baker Doctor here with the writing as well. Yeah, all right. He does have humour, like he does all the way throughout. That doesn't disappear. That's fine. But the snappy elements that Tom Baker has with the Doctor seem to be back, and personally, that's a good thing. I think it makes up a good deal of his Doctor. And this story is also very Doctor centric, which is what it should be. The Doctor having agency in the story. And I don't know why I said that, but there you go, I just did. But there are lots of things that happen in this story with the Doctor that I like. I don't know what Tom thinks of the story arc itself in general. However, he is not one that gives off the idea in his performance that it is terrible. He does handle himself with great ease. All his quirks and his mannerisms are what I would associate with his interpretation of the Doctor. His reactions to certain characters are exactly what I would expect from any incarnation. He tells K9 to shut up, which may seem a bit out of character, but it is in character at the same time. K9 at that point was being unintentionally annoying, so the Doctor barks an order at him. However, we see that he still makes K9 his priority. K9 is lured into the recycling chute, which I really like that idea for. And he goes into the recycling chute, risking radiation and the possibility of being burned. And he saves K9. Later, also, when K9 is under control of the shadow, he once again saves him and gets Drax to remove the control box from underneath his chin. And the concept of K9 also being overthrown is an interesting concept, which I like very much. And I think during the whole run of K9's appearances, that could have been played with a lot more rather than just having him break down. But again, this was classic era. The companion didn't have as much agency as they do today. So I understand why they did what they did. I also like the fact that the Doctor is nearly always facing some kind of jeopardy throughout this, which is what should be happening right from the beginning, actually. They don't quite land on Atrios and they are hovering more so than anything in space. The Marshal, who is an okay character, and the puppet of the Shadow fires the nuclear warhead at the TARDIS, which is that was very mean of him to do that. Tom shows the cool, calm version of the Doctor here when he is facing an irrational danger. The cleverness displayed in the character feigning being hit, whilst not unusual in sci-fi or in Doctor Who, is something that I like to see in the show. I just like to. It's clever. And naturally, what is Doctor Who without an arrest of the main characters? That's always fun. They land on Atrios and it almost happens immediately. Is that a bit predictable? Absolutely. Is it great? Always. Having the Doctor and companions arrested for absolutely nothing is not a new concept, but it adds to their situation and it does leave you wondering how on earth the Doctor is going to get out of this situation. Now, in this case, K9 had hid. The Doctor's solution was his dog whistle, getting Shat to blow the dog whistle. And K9 arrives, he gets K9 to fire at the lights so that they could make a break for it. Another thing that adds jeopardy to the show is the TARDIS itself. One of the cliffhangers is that the TARDIS has gone. This is a concept that I have always loved. I don't think that's a secret. One thing that I mentioned when I covered the Ghost Monument was that I would love for the TARDIS to go missing for an entire series and that be the story arc rather than having the special companion type of story arc. And technically, the TARDIS is a companion too. Big Finish did it with Paul McGann, and they did it with the Ghost Monument one-off episode for Jodie. In this case, there were a couple of parts where we don't see the TARDIS at all because clearly the TARDIS was having its much-deserved day off. And we want to know, how is he going to get it back? We don't see it until part 3 on the planet of evil. The TARDIS is held to ransom. The segments for the TARDIS, or at least the Doctor has to admit to it and then go and get the segments from the TARDIS. The chamber that is in the torture chamber of some kind. The effects that they use for that the one that the Doctor is in, and then later Romani, they are good for the time. I would say there are not too many special effects either in this, mostly because of the budget, probably allowing for the other stories. But they are still well done, as is the effects for the Guardian, which were kept quite simple. The changing of Astra to the segment and all that. I quite like the to scale modelling of the ships that we see as well. That's not really a secret though with me. I always think those scaled shots add a lot to the show and they look effective, much more practical than CGI and probably, much more creative in many respects. There is, however, a lot of transmatting. I think it does slightly convolute the plot just a little bit. Naturally, we don't know about the third planet at first, which is where Astra ends up when she is dragged off. I think that we could have got away with having less of the transmat. It did feel at points like it was being stretched out as much as possible, and the characters were being taken off all over the place and at different times. It works at first because it removes Astra away and sets up a situation for K9 to get into, which is a great idea, but come the end of it, it got too much for me just personally. Also, the lure for K9 to be transmatted to the third planet was a good idea. It isn't clear that it is a different transmat. Not that it's a really big deal, actually. Maybe it's just me being stupid. I just want to get back to the TARDIS a moment because I just thought of something randomly. It said that the TARDIS got covered in rubble, yet later the shadow has it. There does not seem to be a connection, unless I missed it, to how he got it. I think we should have seen it being removed somehow and how he got it to there. Well, I don't know. We just don't know because it's covered in rubble, right? Anyway, back to what I was talking about before, K9. K9 has some really good and important scenes in this. It is nice to see him having a lot to do because in the last story, he didn't have anything to do. He has a really, really great concept and moments in this. Mentalis, right? Mentalis is controlling the war on Zeos. There are no Zeons. That reveal is pretty stellar, and the fact that there that it is left to K9 to communicate with the war computer is quite compelling. And what makes it more interesting is that the war is now over, which means complete obliteration, which then the Doctor has to prevent naturally. Now, I love a good time loop in Doctor Who. The Doctor has to somehow prevent the Marshal from attacking Zeos. His solution is to make a fake segment and then get him stuck into a loop. Now, no fancy sonic screwdrivers, no waving of sonic screwdriver wands, just actual creative solutions and plot jeopardy for the viewer. For 3 parts, the viewer has the knowledge of this time loop that keeps getting like stretching out closer and closer to the destruction, but very slowly, and you're left on tenterhooks, theoretically, of how this is going to be fixed. That creates some fantastic tension. The fact that the characters keep reminding the viewers, plus we get shots of the Marshal saying the same thing over and over again, it does create the tension quite high, in my opinion. And it's just that. It's just an opinion. Now, the Marshal, he is somewhat of an interesting character for the first 3 parts. He is evidently a military man with a military mind. I like that concept that he is a puppet. There is just one thing. There's a black box on the side of his neck. It also gets placed on Astra, on her neck, and under K9's chin. It's obviously some kind of mind control thing. That's a good idea. However, this good idea, like with the shadow, should have been introduced much earlier. It would have been great to have seen it throughout the entire story arc and leaving us to wonder what on earth this black box is. Still, that being said, the Marshal allows for the Doctor to be the character of the Doctor. That might sound a bit weird, but the Doctor does not like fighting with weapons or fighting in general, really, even though he has to do it sometimes. He does not approve of what Atrios and Zeos are doing, but it does allow for a shining moment that's very subtle for the Doctor to come through. The Doctor recommends peace as a deterrent. What I do find interesting is that the Doctor does say that he wants the Princess Astra found. It was very clear and quite obvious who the 6th segment was at this point, very early on. I think it's a good idea that he never gets her officially. The one small change that he does have exchange that he does have with her and the chance to get her as the segment, he chooses not to change her into the segment. That's so fitting with the Doctor. He's not willing to end Astra for the sake of the segment. I would have been intrigued to find out how the Doctor would have got around that and fixed that issue without having Astra change into the segment. However, I also don't mind that we don't. It made much more sense for the other side to get hold of the segments and have them do it instead. It coincided well with the concept that Astra was being manipulated and used as a lure for the Doctor. So I like that idea. What I also like is that truly Astra is the main damsel in distress, a princess that was real but was also the segment. There was sentience there. There was humanity. Plus, the segments all up until now were all objects. So it makes sense that it was a human like character. Although I'm not too sure what I make of the Doctor saying that she was a human being. I didn't think that she was a human. I didn't think that. I have just a minor negative now that doesn't really fit in with the review anywhere. Shat being hit and collapsing in part 4 was a little bit weird. It was unclear as to whether he was dead or if he was just stunned. He sort of just zapped and falls over. Also, another small bit of praise that I do have that can't really go in anywhere else with this particular review is the Marshal communicating with the two-way mirror and the reveal that he is communicating with the skull. That's quite savage. Well, the top half of a skull, no jaw, but really quite good. The cliffhangers are all quite good as well. The Marshal tells the Doctor about the transmat device, and it turns out it was a trap, and he was taken hostage on Zeus. Of course, you know what's going to happen to the Doctor. Then part 3, the cliffhanger was the Marshal going to open fire on Zeus. Then part 4, we have K9 being overpowered by the Shadow, and the Shadow saying that the key to time is his. And part 5, cliffhanger, is where Drax shoots the Doctor and he disappears. We do find out that he shrinks, and Drax makes himself shrink too. Now, Drax, nice little segue there, is an interesting character. He knows the Doctor. He is also a Time Lord. However, in my opinion, he is not the type of Time Lord with the same sort of smarts that the Doctor has or what Romana has. He is good with mechanics, but seems to be a little bit lax in knowledge elsewhere or thinking clearly and sensibly. This would make a good companion. He really would. He is fun. He is entertaining. He is smart with what he knows, but not too much. And he can be easily manipulated with the threat of his life hanging over him. I could have sworn he came back in Classic Who again. Not Big Finish. I am aware that he came back in Big Finish, but in the main series, I swear. But maybe I misremembered. Barry Jackson is the man who plays Drax, and I know he'd done a couple of Doctor Who before that as well, before he came in as Drax, but I'm certain that Drax came back, but maybe I'm just misremembering that. Anyway, Barry Jackson is always very entertaining anyway, so the on-screen chemistry that he and Tom had was very interesting with their characters too. I think because Drax is easily manipulated as well. It would have been interesting to see how that would have played out on screen, much more so than what we have already in the Key to Time. There was a possibility that it may not have been a great idea, though. Who knows, really? He's just really an entertaining character all round. He acts before he thinks, he shrinks himself, and the Doctor only to leave the TARDIS door open. I mean, come on, think about it, Drax. But this silly move allowed for much more creative writing. He and the Doctor are able to infiltrate the enemy base inside the body of K9, which for some reason I find highly amusing. And I don't know why. Now, overall, as a story arc, The Key to Time is probably not something that I would consider ever to be stellar or amazing in any way, shape, or form. The concept of having something so dangerous that it remains the focus of 6 stories and 26 parts in itself is a great idea. The execution was not as great as it could have been. There were lots of chances to really embed the plot of the story throughout the entirety as a main focus of each story that takes place within the story arc, but it just wasn't taken. The Guardians were underused, and there was not really a clear agent until we got to the Armageddon factor with the Shadow. The story was seriously lacking in the remainder of what we are looking with the reminder of what we are looking for, which was the next segment for the key to time. It's a bit haphazard, and I think that's partly because maybe there was some kind of lack of communication. We've got different writers writing all sorts of things, and maybe no sense of direction that they had to sort of include. Well, you know what I mean, making sure certain things were included all the way throughout. Now, it is time at last, in the 6 weeks of looking at the key to time, to see what you think. I purposely left this right until the very end because I stupidly asked you to have a look and answer the questions that I asked you instead of breaking it down individually, which is what I should have done really, but never go. And it was 5 months that I asked you as well. Wow. So, Rants, Reviews, Raves said, great idea in concept, disappointing in execution. All the build up for something that just gets split up again without any real payoff. Some good individual stories though, so not all bad. Yes, that's almost like an RTD finale, but at least a little bit better. At least this one used the time much more efficiently. I agree that the individual stories are good though. There's also in those particular comments that you kindly left for me a fair amount of praise for Mary Tam as Romana, and I just so happen to agree. She is a very eloquent Romana. Now, Horror Stew says, I loved the gimmick as a child, but to this day I feel let down by the resolution. Regardless, it's a fun season with some fun stories. I miss Leela though. Romana was a bit uppity until the regeneration. I think that's personal preference as to which Romana you prefer. I think with the ending, that seems to be a general consensus. A lot of people I've spoken to in the past think the same thing. Ian Buckley just so happens to agree that it's okay. The season starts well, but loses steam halfway through, and the end is very unsatisfying. The pacing, I agree, it does suffer in this. It really does. And I think this relates to the lack of focusing on the main arc. Anyway, that is what I think. Please do let me know what you think. I will see you on, next Doctor Who Sunday. So thank you very much for watching. Bye bye. Thank you for watching today. Don't forget you can join me on my other platforms as well. I've got YouTube, Rumble, Spotify, X, TikTok, Instagram, Locals, Substack, and I also have a Discord. Everything is linked below.